is what I've seen is incredible insensitivity that we've been seeing that has been talked about, not only from the candidates, but in the media, about these issues and sort of like it's taken for granted that somehow that's not going to be reflected in the vote.
So I want to add to the piece Rosario brought up about mass incarceration. So I think it's very important as women, and especially women of color, that you get into the conversation and you put your power, your strength into this movement, into this race. Because what I've noticed as a person who spent 27 years in prison, that women, my own women, my sisters, do not get involved with the sisters that are behind bars.
Yeah.
And we need you. We need you stronger. I agree completely, and I would just add that I think women of color have always, throughout our history, played critical roles in building the revolutions that have helped to win our freedom. And, you know, at this particular historical moment, I just couldn't be more thrilled to see so many brilliant, beautiful, bold, courageous women coming together to say, we are committed to building this political revolution, a revolution that didn't begin with Bernie Sanders and certainly won't end with him. It's a revolution that has, been going on, a struggle that has been going on for a long, long time, but we will never achieve a real democracy in the United States unless women of color come together and say we are willing to stand up for our communities, for our families, for our children. Today in the United States, 1 in 4 women have a loved one behind bars, and the figure is 1 in 2 for African American women. And this is not going to be changed through piecemeal policy reform. It won't be changed through politics as usual. It will only come about when we muster the courage and the willingness to join together in a meaningful political revolution. And so I'm thrilled to see all of the work that's been done by those in the Bernie Sanders campaign and other activists around the country who are rejecting the politics of the past and are committed to building on the great work of the revolutionaries that came before us.
Are leadership candidates sophisticated in their understanding of where, that when and where I in that way? Are they understanding that our lives are intersected with the criminal justice system, capitalization as they are? And is there sophistication in terms of policy proposals that will allow us to make substantial change right at the gate?
I think when we're looking at multiple things, I think so often we're segregated in our way of thinking about things, and so women's issues as a sort of like side note, as if you can talk about them out of relation to foreign policy, out of relation to healthcare. Especially people of color are disproportionately affected by healthcare issues. So, for me, when we're talking about the different candidates, at one point Hillary Clinton did talk about that universal health care has to be the conversation, that a single-payer health care system has to be the conversation. And then she backpedaled on that. Yeah. And now she wants to do incremental change and expanding the Affordable Care Act, but there's no detail to that. And the reality is that's going to leave millions of people wanting and hurt, and everything from the flint water prices and the fact that you have in places like Baltimore and Chicago where the levels of PTSD rates as high as vets that are coming home. We need to know that we're going to have care for all of our people all across the board. So we access to college education, that affects women incredibly because you have women who've been graduating and then having to take that many more years in order to be able to pay back those loans. Being able to have universal health care, up until $250,000, you're not going to get taxed more for that. You're actually going to be saving money every year. So when you have someone like Jon Stewart, when you talk about the bailout and how that really hurt people, and Jon Stewart was sitting there interviewing an economist at the time going, okay, so if you're planning on spending billions of dollars on a bailout, why don't you give that to working people across the nation? That would equal to about $5,000 plus each person would get. Would that stimulate the economy and change everything? And then comes well, yeah. But for some reason, even though people marched against the Iraq War, which hurt and killed hundreds of thousands of people, brought back our soldiers if they came back at all maimed and the PTSD, started the creation of ISIS. Like, that's rape trafficking, that's women across the nation. Like, this is also about, we can't be segregating ourselves and just thinking about women just within our borders, but all around the world. And so all of these policies have really broad range of either help or hurt that is going on. And that's the thing that, you know, like, these are so often women and people of color are the invisible ones. And in death, they're even more invisible. And we have to make sure that as we vote coming up in these primaries, that we make sure that we're voting with them in mind, that we understand that the ramifications of a single-payer healthcare system can really do to people, especially people who are disproportionately in areas that have terrible issues around environmental justice. If you're pushing the TPP deal, up until 2008, Obama called Hillary out on going, you were up for NAFTA up until you were running for presidency. And not wanting to talk about the millions of people who started migrating from Mexico because they couldn't afford to grow corn anymore. You know, the millions of Americans who lost work and jobs. Like the reality about how that allows them to skirt around country sovereignty and create slave labor conditions. Like, you're really, like, this isn't making us better by always considering and thinking about solely corporations as people. So, you know, why did she back that on a single-payer healthcare system? I don't know. She gets a lot of money from pharmaceutical companies. She gets a lot of money from Wall Street. Maybe that has to do something about the bailout. I don't know. I don't really know. But I know that her saying, I'm sorry, doesn't cut it for families who are suffering. And we really need to be thinking about someone who has foresight and who's a leader with foresight, and not someone who's a follower and always having to be dragged to the right side of the issue with hindsight.
I'm so happy in such a short period of time that we've already arrived in a conversation about the role of women in the election that is expansive, because I've had such frustrating conversations, I don't know if any of you have, with women that go, well, you're a feminist, are you not? So who are you going to vote for? I'm confused. Is it to say that, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a question of identity? There is no question in my mind who is the feminist in this race, right? Because to me, right, feminism has to do with the consciousness of capitalism, right, of colonialism, of racism, and so all of these issues have to be a part of our conversation when we talk about how we cast our vote and why. And it's just, I'm just so happy to have you all assembled here today. I'm so honored to be here to be able to talk to you, because I've had such, frankly, frustrating conversations where we can't get to that. And I think it's really women that are going to be able to help us understand that we have to be holistic about these issues, but one thing does not exist without the other.
So I wanted to answer that. Again, I have to go back to our issue with mass incarceration and what we've done, what has happened within our own community, women of color, who have been and continue to be the fastest growing incarcerated population in this country ever in any history. And that is crazy. We are being incarcerated at a rate of 680% yearly. And that is ridiculous. And why is that? And when, I'm going back and I'm doing research and looking at stuff Michelle has done and talks that some of us have had before, I'm finding out that black and brown women, the median rate income monthly is $600 or less. $600 or less. And so that is saying something. That in itself is very clear that something is wrong. And when I see people like Bernie Tacoma, who is a woman, saying that, now we have to do something, we have to get people off of welfare, we have to go into these communities and do something. Hello? You created the crime bill, the welfare, this monster that we have to stay out of control. So that backpedaling, that double talk, I don't understand it, and it bothers me because I have people that have become my family still inside prison since they were 17 years old. 17 years old. This is 37, some of them 40 years later, and they are still in there because of these bills that were imposed under our husband. So I don't understand. For me, it's not clear how. I know people change. I changed. But I don't see how that massive change. It has happened in the way that she's talking, and like Rosario said, the double talking, it just bothers me. And government in itself, when we talk about government, I saw something, I have to share this with you guys, and I have to bring it. Government is government. It doesn't matter whether government is performing a function you want it to perform or one you think it should avoid. Anything government does will be organized, financed, and carried out using force. Not just force against criminals or people that do bad things, right? But force against taxpayers and innocent bystanders. Any program based on force is inefficient, expensive, misdirected, and intrusive of individual liberty. Individual liberty. And I will get back to you on who quote that is. That actually just came from an article that was written in 1987, I believe, and it was relevant to today, right? It's relevant to today, and so we have to really look at that and address it. And as women, we have the power. I can't vote, but you can. And I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you. That's a shame. And that's been stripped from me. An indelible right, an indelible constitutional right has been stripped not only from me, but so many like me. And I have to fight. I have to fight like crawl to get that right back. And I will do so. But while I do it, I want to inform each and every one of you that it is your right and you have that power and we need you. We cannot do it without you. Thank you very much.
But to the room, what's the one piece of advice that every woman of color needs to think about and consider first and foremost when she's making a decision primarily?
I think one of the most important things that we can all consider, particularly for women of color who are far more likely to have loved ones who are trapped in the justice system or cycling in and out, or who ourselves are struggling to earn a living wage, is that we need a politician, a president, who will tell us the truth. Someone who will be willing to be accountable to us and not to corporations, to big funders. We need representation that truly is of, by, and for the people. And to this date, we have not yet achieved that in America. You know, I believe the revolution to achieve a democracy in the United States is unfinished. It may have begun a long, long time ago, and I trace the beginning of democracy not just to the Declaration of Independence, but to the first slave revolt, to the yearning for freedom and a desire to work for it and to take great risks for it. And in our democracy, we still have people who are disenfranchised, who are denied the right to vote, but also millions of people who are effectively denied the right to vote because their votes are canceled out by the big money that is funneled into politicians' campaigns. And so if we have politicians who are taking money from private prisons, taking money from payday lending, taking money from pharmaceutical companies, taking money from private health insurance companies, and at the same time claiming to represent our interests, I think we can say, I don't believe it's possible to serve two masters. We want a government, a president that is accountable to us, to the people directly. And for women of color, who often pay the greatest price for the injustices that exist in our healthcare system, our criminal justice system, education system, and the list goes on and on. I think we deserve a president who will tell us the truth and is accountable to us and not to the big money that is being poured into our politics and corrupting it to its core.
So we know that we can't educate our way to fair pay, right? And so there's been so much conversation about equal, about fair pay, because of course this affects all women of color. What do you ladies believe is the most pressing issue with regard to fair pay, and how can any candidate fairly address that in a way that's going to make significant changes in it?
Well, part of it as well is just recognizing that it's not just going, oh, women are paid 70 cents to the dollar to a man, because what women you're talking about, because black women, Asian women, Latino women, trans women, they're all paying very different amounts. And there's people, especially in the companies, are taking advantage of that. And so you'll see in particular industries, it's not just because for some reason a whole demographic of people have flocked to that particular industry, it's because they're being exploited. And we're seeing that from everywhere, with Haiti wanting to raise their minimum wage to 51 cents and then getting pushed back by the State Department. No, you must put that back down because we don't want to pay more for our Hanes and our Levi's. So this is something that's coming from our greater government. These are the things that, when you hire these people to do these jobs, and then you're okay with the fact that you're just going to go, okay, once every 4 years I'm going to vote. I don't really pay much attention to midterm elections, which is a shame because they're so much more relevant and important. And you have someone who constantly keeps telling you, don't worry about it, if you vote me in, I'll take care of it, and close the door of the Oval Office. Those are the types of things those are the types of decisions that get made behind those closed doors that really, really hurt people. And so that's why we really need someone who is going to keep that door open. Do I think that Bernie Sanders is perfect? No. Do I think that, that what's going on and being represented on the Republican side is somehow this monstrosity that's being created right now? Absolutely not. The reality is that we have a president named Barack Hussein Obama, and for some reason people think that meant that the glass ceiling was broken and that racism was over. Absolutely not. And we're seeing a huge pushback about that right now, specifically while people are voting for people, especially that have very racist and bigoted and sexist opinions. Why are those people flourishing? Because there's people who are really hurting right now. Women are hurting, children are hurting, people of color are hurting, the LGBTQ community is hurting. That's why you're seeing the growth of the Green Party, the Dreamers, where you're seeing the growth of Black Lives Movement, because there's an atmosphere that's on the ground that's really strong and intense that needs to be addressed. And also on the other side, how people are doing it, that are not just all organizing, and that's what makes me feel really hopeful about someone like Bernie Sanders going into office, because I know that there's people around who are like, you're already seeing what Black Lives Matter with Buy Anita. You're already seeing that these people are ready, and people are going behind Trump because he's going to say you're fired. People are going behind Bernie because he's saying you're hired. So I know that we're ready for it. People keep going, what's going to happen? He can't change everything. No, but he's got the energy is here to change it. But understand that not everybody's just organizing. Some people really do just want someone who's just going to take care of it, close the door, and they don't have to think about the details. Some people are just really happy that they get a chance to start being racist again. Because you've been really politically correct for a really long time, that the situation on the ground is not politically correct. So this is, no matter what's going on right now, we've got a major fight ahead of us. And you can't keep watching, when I'm watching, especially with the other Democratic candidates, dividing women. And I see, but on the Republican side, a whole divisiveness as well going on. This is what keeps happening. Every single time this election cycle goes on, mass media makes this whole big show and entertainment thing about it. And then what ends up happening is half the country feels that they lost, and they spend the rest of the time being really sore losers and stopping progress. And that can't happen. We really need to be working together. So when women are talking about how do we get equal pay, that means that we're recognizing how different it is for all different women along that scale. And that we're talking about that because it's not as simple as just going 70 cents to the dollar. It's way more convoluted and not nuanced than that. And we need candidates who are willing to speak to the issues and get to that, so that we can start figuring out what policies we need to support. What do we need to really be doing? And it's not going, okay, so in our deportation centers, we have to have 34,000 people every single day. You're just doing these large streets, and it's not just all undocumented people. We're talking about stop and frisk, because we're making these pretending that we're getting these legislations that's protecting everybody, but all you're doing is causing more divisiveness in the community. And I said this yesterday, and I'll say it again. When Hillary Clinton was senator here, we had 2 million people who were stopped and frisked in this state. 2 million. In 2061, with 506,000 people, 90% of which, I didn't say a word, and 90% of which were innocent. Why? Because you can't tell someone's criminality by the color of their skin. We're seeing that with Islamophobia. We're seeing that with mass deportation. These are people who came and flew in with visas, people who have green cards. married children, elderly people, people who are seeking asylum, and they don't have anything, zero recourse to get any kind of to sit before a judge, to be able to go against their deportation. There's a real pushback on anyone who wants to speak back. They're really dividing us in so many ways and making it about black, brown, Latino, this, and we need to stop that. We need to stop letting fall into their narrative and start recognizing that there are a lot of men who also want women to be able to have equal pay. Because they're two-family home households, and they need to take care of their kids. That paid family leave is important to men and women. That's the thing that we have to start making, and the whole he for she movement, and understanding that we've got a lot of people to talk to. As much as it's really important for us to talk to each other, we have to continue to spread this message outside of ourselves. And that's the only way we're going to really hold our electorate accountable. If we're holding ourselves accountable.
We're in an environment, because black women in particular are absolutely more likely to encounter domestic violence, but when it comes to police violence and how women of color are intersecting with the state in very violent ways, what do you think the conversation needs to be, the political conversation needs to be, to affect actual change with regard to that?
I think firstly, when we talk about racial justice, it's talking about how multifaceted it is, so that it's not just physical violence that's perpetuated on black and brown people and women, but it's environmental violence. We know that when our air and water is being polluted, that black, brown, and Native people are disproportionately affected by that. So there are neighborhoods that don't have access to clean water, clean air, and at the same time, don't have access to recreational green space and to art. And so I think one thing is to talk about how layered the issue is.
I think speaking loud makes it. Yes, but we really need you on mic, please.
I'm back.
So yes, to talk about.
Hello? Just to talk about how layered the issue is, that really there's legal violence that's perpetuated, there's environmental violence, and to acknowledge that, and also to talk to your friends and family about that. So when a candidate talks about the dangers of climate change, that knowing that in our community that means so much more, and to really acknowledge that.
Are you encouraged by the political conversation with regard to topics like that? Do you think that there's an earnest conversation happening that's actually going to have some policy reform that really changes the equation?
I mean, I think so. I feel as far as even the conversations that we're now having about transparency, I feel within my friends, within my family, especially within young people, that there's a sort of political literacy that's happening now. That people are understanding more about how the system works. People are understanding more that some of the issues that we face in our community are systemic issues. And so in that way, yeah, I was hugely inspired by that.
I think one of the most important things for all of us to keep in mind is that these problems can't be solved simply through elections. That if we are going to build a meaningful political revolution that brings about a real democracy and an end to structural violence, state violence, as well as the forms of violence we see playing out on our streets day in and day out in our most impoverished and neglected communities, that it's going to take a movement that extends well beyond the election season.
Right.
I have to say that I was surprised when Simone reached out and called and invited me to participate in this dialogue, because I had declined to endorse Bernie Sanders, and she called up and she said, "It's fine with us if you don't endorse. We want to have a serious conversation about this issue, and we value your perspective, and you say whatever you want. And I've been around enough campaigns to know that that kind of thing never happens. Our campaigns typically are these highly choreographed sort of acts of political theater where everything is scripted and people are told what to say and how to say it, and it's poll tested and focus groups before the lines are delivered. And so for her to invite me, I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been, because this isn't like any other campaign. And, you know, my concern with endorsing candidates is that given our two-party system, we are often seduced into believing that if we just vote for the right guy or the right gal, then everything will be fine. When in reality, we are going to have to build a new party or an independent movement. I hope that women of color, the folks in this room, the people who have been doing brilliant, beautiful, bold, courageous work on behalf of Bernie Sanders' campaign, the people who have been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, the dreamers, the people who have been doing great work for trans folks, the LGBT movement, that all of these folks will commit themselves to building a long-term movement, coordinated movement that will sustain this political revolution well beyond this election season. And that, to me, is the work that we have to be committed to in the long term. If any of these goals of universal health care, of ending mass incarceration, all the rest, will ever become a reality, because it's not just about a single election. It's about building a new movement, potentially building a new party, if we're going to ever have a democracy that truly is of, by, and for the people.
Amen.
So I wanted to add to that. Let me go back, I think, to the original piece of what I heard. For women in this movement, and believe in any movement, we have to be very clear, transparent, and honest with ourselves first. So sitting here, I went right back into when I was a little girl and I started being abused. And I reached out and I tried to tell, and no one believed me. And it was 2 women that shut me down when I was 12. One was my mother, and the other was my school social worker, right? My school counselor for the book. So I think we as women have to be very clear, very honest, and transparent with ourselves and say, we know things happen within our own families, within our own communities, within our own. And we have to be honest about that. As much as it might hurt, as much as it might tear us down, and we embarrassed or ashamed, it happens. Because what happens is a girl child could become just like me. No one was there to help. No one was there to intervene. No one was there to just listen and just to be a shoulder and be an ear. And we have done that. I've seen that perpetuated throughout my 51 years. I've seen it. This has happened to me periodically. Too much. And I continue to see it. So I ask that as women, because we have this, we got this. This is our time. This is our movement. And it will not be substantial and it will not be effective if we don't look within ourselves and within our families and within our society, our neighborhoods, and say, we see something wrong, we can fix it. We can take care of it before it even goes any further. And that's what I would like to see. I believe that that is very important and that is key in a lot of this. And so when we get to what Michelle just said and what Rosario said, and what you said to Tessa, that these governments, these organizations, these people that were born with these so-called silver or gold spoons, I didn't think they were silver spoons, right? It's our voices that are in it. This is who they have to turn to understand and to say, is this okay, is this not okay? And eventually we will get them out of here because we know how to govern ourselves. We know what we need and we know what we want, and we can do this. We can do this.
The audience, we'd love to hear from you all because we recognize that we are going to be the game changers. So let's hear from some of the game changers, either questions or statements with regard to what we've been speaking.
I have a question for anyone on the panel. My name is Veronica Dunlap. I'm a lawyer and a Harlemite. And one of the things that I haven't heard from any of the candidates is how they intend to include the perspective of women of color in their administration given that if your administration or your party or even your board lacks diversity of voices, usually you end up invisible again. I really haven't heard Hillary's camp talk about it. I haven't heard Bernie's camp talk about inclusion, and I even, sometimes in this administration, I found myself feeling invisible. Like, I appreciate that, you know, my brother's keeper program, but there was no my sister's keeper until now, when he's leaving, and I felt like a little invisible. And so, any of you who would like to speak on that, is that yes, we have these issues, and yes, grassroots organizing is great, political organizing is great, but what about, like, being at the table? What about, like, drafting the legislation? What about being a part of the administration?
I have to say, you know, for the first time ever endorsing a candidate, that was definitely one of the things that I've been seeing a lot. You know, the Democratic numbers are really low because people were really disenchanted. You know, they all organized, they thought that they had their guy, their one person. Within 2 months of him becoming president, people lost faith. And to his due credit, you know, Twitter only just had its 10-year anniversary. I don't think he really fully appreciated the organizing that was possible that could have continued after getting him the seat. To say that it was all obstructionism is a complete fallacy because he had the Senate in the House. So, like, he lost that afterwards because he didn't continue with the momentum that got him there. But, you know, and I got a call because I signed against my brother's keeper because I was very disappointed that, you know, for his legacy organization he would create, that he would finally, yes, talk about race, but he would do it by, you know, by gender. And I got a call from Rosario Dawson, like, what? And it was just like, because I'm sorry, like, this is a really strong and really big issue. And how are we truly going to resolve it for everyone across the aisle? And it's not just being black men, but women and Asian and natives and everyone. You know, the fact that VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, stagnated for so long because they didn't want to include trans women and Native women. You know, like, this is ridiculous. And I can tell you, like, the Native Indian community really doesn't vote. They don't show up because they have a very long history of understanding that they're not at the table. They're showing up for Bernie. You know, you have people like Nina Turner showing up for Bernie. And these are people that are like going, okay, this is the future of the party that we're going to give this seat. It's Kamala Harris's and Elizabeth Warren's and the Tulsi Gabbard's who are stepping down from the DNC because they're going, no, I have to be behind the person who's going to not hit the shiny red button when they go into office and take us to war again. Because that's really, ultimately, the only thing that the commander-in-chief can really just do. You know, and so, but for me, when I'm looking at it, you know, I'm seeing someone who has dreamers already working for him and with him. Like, that, no one's doing that. Like, that to me is very encouraging. I can't say exactly who he's going to hire or what he's going to do, but the fact that he's talking to Native Indian issues, the fact that he's talking about dreamers, and he's going so far, you know, when you look at it, people going, oh, you know, let's stick to the issues, and, you know, Hillary saying that, I'm like, well, can you tell us what you're talking about expanding about the Affordable Care Act? Can you give us some more details about immigration? Because he's given us plenty. And he's talking about not only stopping these deportations and giving a pathway to citizenship for people, but also bringing back people who were unjustly deported so they can be reunited with their families. I don't hear anyone else talking about that. That's a really, really, really big deal. You know? So, can I just say he's totally perfect, and I swear it's going to be the United Colors of Benetton, you know? It's going to be like, you know, Rwanda, they're going to figure it out and get all women. I don't know. But I feel like the person who, even when he signed, said, you know what, yes, he did sign the farm bill. Listen to him when he talked about it and what he said and the foresight that he had of going, this is dangerous and this is why I'm voting for it, but these amendments have to be in place because this is wrong. He wasn't calling young people super predators that need to be brought to heel. Okay, he signed against the welfare reform bill, which she pushed for and said people on welfare were deadbeats. Okay, when she talked about undocumented people, she said illegal. Okay, she's on the round on this. When he was walking with, you know, Martin Luther King, she was a Goldwater girl. Okay, so people want to say, apparently one of her favorite quotes is Maya Angelou quote, you know, when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. So, okay, great, you're coming around on these issues and everyone's saying we should just drop out because he's pulled her over more to the left. Well, again, stop telling me that I need to vote for the follower. I want to vote for a leader who's talking about the clean water act bill that's going to be happening. And this is the climate of like, don't ask, don't tell, and you know, the DOMA.
you know, and all of a sudden there's this guy talking about homos in the military, and you see, Bernie, he doesn't have to do this. Going, I'm sorry, were you talking about the thousands of men and women, the homosexuals, the thousands of them who were giving their lives? Are you insulting the this was not a climate that was okay to hear that in the 90s. Like, that was actually pushed back against completely. So for me, I just see someone, again, who is not perfect, but has a character and integrity that I have seen. I'm hard pushed, I'm hard pressed to see him ever talk inhumanely about anyone, ever, in a way that I'm seeing across with literally every other candidate. At some time or other, you have to say, I'm sorry. That's not okay for me. The commander-in-chief doesn't get to say I'm sorry when there's that many lives on the line. It just doesn't work. Oops, I did it again. Doesn't work. My bad. Doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You know? So I feel like when Black Lives Matter activists show up and are yelling at his podium and he stands back, he tries to shake their hand. It's not like a perfect conversation. He's not he's not taking them out. You know, he's letting them have their chance to speak. This, to me, impresses me and gives me hope that we have someone who is already listening to young people and pushing them. He wouldn't be here if it wasn't for every young person and all the people who are giving their little bit of money to make it possible for them to be here. So like you said, he's accountable to us. The only reason he would ascend to office is because of us. So I have to believe that we're going to have a lot more of a say with him than any other candidate that's running for office right now.
Hi, I want to make a brief statement of hope to everyone here, as apparently someone of not a person of color, right? I'm not a person of color. I'm not a person of color in New York City, despite the fact that not one of my grandparents was born in New York City. My mother's Puerto Rican, my father's Italian and Irish. I had the Italian accent, I got the Irish coloring, but trust me, take me to Alabama, and I'm not white. I am also someone who, in 1972, was incarcerated for the crime of dating a black boy, which was considered, man, like you just don't go there. The judge agreed, your daughter's uncontrollable, maybe a little crazy, remand, 2 summers in Spofford Hall over that. Where does that leave me today? I am one of your invisible allies. I am there for you, and I've had an opportunity that very few people of my skin tone have had, to see it from the other side, to experience it from the other side, to get my ass kicked because I'm holding hands with a black dude on 42nd Street. Been there, done that, right? Thank God we made some progress since that day, but I'm not the only boomer that has had that background. And I'm not the only boomer or white person who is a member of SURJ, and I want everybody to know about SURJ. SURJ, Stand Up for Racial Justice. That is the white supporters' arm of Black Lives Matter. Because we don't know how we can help Black lives. We need you to tell us. So I am there. Many of us are there growing every day. If you're white, if you're too white for Black Lives Matter, join the SURJ. And join the movement and make it happen. Thank you.
I was born and raised in the Bronx. I've lived there all my life. I go to school in the Bronx, and I want to be a writer when I grow up, if I could say that. When I get older, I'd like to be a writer, and I want to somehow impact people with my writing. I want to make a difference somehow, and me being a young female of color, what advice would you give me growing up in this so-called man's world in the 21st century?
Well, I would say, first of all, if you want to be a writer, write. Anybody tell you that, wait, you have to say, doesn't matter that your voice doesn't count, or that you're not saying it the right way, you need to tone it down or dial it back. You speak your own truth and use your own God-given talent, passion, to help change the world. And you can change the world just by speaking your truth, just by writing your truth, just by sharing who you are, the gift of who you are with this world. And I can say from personal experience that when I began the process of writing my first book, there were so many people around me telling me, people aren't going to read that, people aren't going to believe that, you can't say that. And I'm so grateful for those who actually helped to support and encourage me, including those who were locked up in prison, who heard about the book in progress and said, you have to speak this truth for those of us who can't be heard. And there are so many people who need to hear your truth, whatever it is, and you will be doing us a disservice if you keep your own gift locked up inside. So if you want to write, write, and be a better.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm so happy to hear this panel because, you know, when I talk to my friends, even my own daughters, like, I'm voting for Hillary. Why? Because they want to see a woman president. I just don't really think that's the reason, and I think as black women, we shouldn't just guarantee our vote to somebody because of no reasons, really. I work with a group, I work with a group called New York State Foreclosure Defense Bar. Women of color and their families are losing homes. Okay, banks are stealing our homes with the help of the court and the judges and the banks. The bank's attorneys are so arrogant. Can you just maybe talk about this a little bit and also make sure that Bernie Sanders knows that this is a big issue? I live in Brooklyn. There are 12,000 cases in foreclosure court right now, and more than half of them are women of color.
Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles, California. My father moved here when I was 9 to Brooklyn, so I split my time between the two. But I was raised, my grandparents had a house in West Adams in Los Angeles. And I saw that happen to my grandfather and my grandmother. You know, she was sick, there's predatory loan people came in, and it happened all across the block. I mean, it's a huge issue that affects people in this nation in such a way. I can't speak to, probably Rosario can better than I could. I can't speak to the senator and what his plans are for that specifically. But it is something that is enormous and just that we need to just shed a light on.
So, since I came out, I was placed in Brooklyn, and so I stayed there. I was fortunate enough to get my own first-time apartment and pay a rent check and all that stuff on my own. And one of the things in these 4 years since I've been out, I've noticed the change in the coloring of the neighborhood I'm in. So because I noticed a drastic change within these 4 years of the neighborhood that I'm in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, I wanted to find out what was going on and what was the history of it, because what I know was prison history. So I wanted to know what's going on out here. And so one thing that I found out, and just had the conversation on the way here this morning, was that in the 60s and the 70s, when all the racial uprising, riots and stuff were going on, white people moved out. The white flight happened. Thank you. Right? And so black people remained or went into those areas that the whites left and didn't want anymore. Now it's become this nouveau, pseudo, whatever it is, I don't even know what to call it, where it's this massive influx of white people in these neighborhoods, and black people can't pay the same kind of rent. Let's be honest. I don't care. Black people can't pay the same kind of rent. And we have a lot of black and brown women in these neighborhoods because a lot of our black and brown men are incarcerated. They are incarcerated or they're not there. That's a whole other talk show. right? But for now, we're talking about those black and brown women who cannot afford to pay the rent, who are doing what they're struggling and trying to get into, into that pool and say, hey, I have a degree, I have the experience, and whatever. Look at me, I'm able to do this, I'm capable, I want to do this, right? I have a family, I have the support. But we are not being looked at like that, right? We're not being recognized for what we can do. And so black and brown women are suffering because of it, but we're being placed out. I know what's happened in my neighborhood, that they come around with bags of money. There's this one older gentleman, he's a southern gentleman, and he had his own home. He was offered $800,000 in a brown paper bag for his home. He gave it up because he's never seen that much money in his life. $800,000 doesn't go far, especially if you're young, if you happen to be older. Sadly, the next day he had a massive heart attack, but he survived. But imagine what that $800,000 can do or will not do, for it's not going to go far away. And so he went south. But this is what's happening. They're coming into the neighborhoods, they're offering the money, they have the money, and we don't have it. A lot of us don't have it. That's just being honest. It's not about being poor or rich or whatever. We just don't have it, and we're not allowed to get it because it's like the crabs in the bucket mentality, and it's the oppressor stifling us in the neck, in our throat, everywhere. The actions that they perpetuate, right? So it's very, very difficult for black and brown women to just maintain, to just take care of a family, and they know this and make it even harder. We have families, we have children, we have so many things. We have maybe those men that are incarcerated that we need to take care of. We have grandmothers, we have so many things. We have so many issues to deal with. But this is what I've seen, and I think it's really hard. And so this conversation has to happen also, so it could be at the forefront of this. I'm sure Bernie Sanders doesn't know it to this extent. I don't think anyone knows it to this extent. But we need to know this, and we need to have the conversation. Nothing changes until we talk about it. And when we talk about it, we got to do something about it. We just can't keep talking about it. And I can come out here and talk. That's why I'm sitting here, because I believe strongly that Bernie is the only one that's really getting it. That really understands it. That's why I'm sitting here. Because it means
You know better, you do better, right?
Just add to that really quickly, because the bailout funds are still going out, correct? Like the bailout money that went to the bank is still being paid. And the people who voted yes on it got double the amount of money than the people who voted no, because they still tried to give people money who voted no on it down the line. But they gave, this is a reality that as long when Wall Street has that much power and they're too big to fail, they were too big to fail then. They're not any smaller, they're getting bigger now. So we have a looming crisis ahead of us right now. So what's going on with our housing isn't going to get better. The gentrification in New York is astronomical. And I grew up in a squat in the Lower East Side. I was discovered on my stoop. I would never be where I am right now if my parents didn't have the insanity and the tenacity to move into a building that didn't have water heater or electricity because they were young and figured they could put it together. I was 6 years old when I moved in there. There were no other kids in there. But luckily, my mom learned to do plumbing, put a sewage line in. My dad did construction, did electrical. It was amazing. And I got to grow up in Manhattan and have opportunities. But we literally could never do that now. That was because that community was completely abandoned until now it's become so gentrified. And I'm watching it work. I'm like, wait. Young urban professionals. Damn it, I became the problem. Right? I can afford to be there, but no one else can. The kids that I work with, the Lower East Side Girls Club, and they're like, you're so lucky you got out. No. This is an amazing, rich community, and we need this diversity. We need all the culture. We need all the women, black, white, brown, native, everybody. That's what makes America great. That's what makes New York great. That's what makes it on the map everywhere in the world. And so we cannot let these special interests and Citizens United and corporations being treated like people and bankers being able to write their own check to bail themselves out of the mess that they put everybody else in. So everybody else loses their home and no one sees jail time?
Right. That's right.
That's why I call them shitty bikes. I'm like, really? So needed a bailout. And now people in London, they have bank bikes. They have, it's a bank on it. It's £1 for 24 hours. That's $1.50 for 24 hours. here you gotta put it in like every half an hour or something like that, like $10. I mean, they're just ripping you off.
Right.
And you're advertising for them. And now they got a stadium and all this kind of stuff. I'm sorry.
Right.
Like what? How does that, I mean, and you're talking about single-payer healthcare system is a pie-in-the-sky pipe dream, but that's okay? That seems like an SNL Onion article. Like, I'm like, you've got to be kidding. It's April Fool's Day. Please tell me it's all in a joke. And then now real people are going to get the help that they actually need. Like, this is the real issue moving forward, and why this is so critical is that we have to have someone in office who is not held and have bosses or have relationships or any of those kinds of things with these people, because they're going to drag us back down again. They're looking out for their own interests. And we have to look out for ours, because no one else is going to do it for us.
Is there anyone in the audience who has a burning question about an issue that they believe has not been addressed by the council?
I would like to know what is dogged endorsement of, and I'm not advocating either caretaker, what is dogged endorsement by young women of Hillary Clinton because she's a woman? And I'd like to know
Well, okay. Let's address that quickly, because I really do want to get back to the question I'm going to allow for the campaign that has not been.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, and I think this is something that I can speak to. I just feel like there's been this when you have an idea of a dream of there being a woman in office, which I assume we all have, there's just a narrative of who that woman would be. And so I think for some women, I've had conversations with women who are like, I like Bernie. They talk about his electability, although as the campaign goes on, they have to sort of check themselves about that because people do think it's gross. But I think it's just having to retire, in idea. That, I think for many people feel like when they vote for the lesser of two evils, which is an unfortunate byproduct of our system. But so I think for some people, they're like, goodness, if I could vote for who is definitely the lesser of these two evils, when we talk about someone like Trump, and is also a woman, and also the candidate on the other side, I'm not sure can win. That's an unfortunate narrative that's put out by mass and corporate media. And so I can't say that I don't understand it. I do understand it. I've seen it, and I've had to talk to many people that feel that way.
Okay, we're going to come back into this.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Joanne Henry. I'm a community activist, senior citizen. And just for the history of it, a lot of young people don't deal with the history of what's going on with females. Because we had a black candidate.
Come on now.
We had a white candidate running for office. But I'm 75, we didn't deal with that. So I'm not suggesting that young people should not deal with that. I'm saying you have to look at history. If you check the facts out, as this group has said, you will see the issue for Hillary is not women. The issue for Bernie is women. And on top of that, he was born in Brooklyn. So if you go about New York, I just wanted to say I was born in Queens, raised in the Bronx, 35 years, in Manhattan on the east side for 40 years. I was a state representative. I was also a teacher working with 1199 Union, not for Bernie at this point. But I want to say to the young people and the panel, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And I go around talking to young people all the time because that's the history of New York. You vote, we'll get Bernie. You better bring your Bernie out. You vote, Bernie will come out. In the independent area of New York, there's a lot of people working independent. Talk to them. Because people like my age are not really ready yet. Because we've registered all the females that have tried to win. And in their minds, they think Hillary is a little bit better than others. She's not. Young people, get out and vote and register. The last thing I want to say is, because of the panel and how you thought, the fact is, even though elections are not necessarily the best, young people, you've got to go out and run and vote. It's a job. It's not even different. You guys got to go out and run for office. East side, west side, Bronx, Queens. I'm from Charlie Brangel's district. We fought hard to convince them that Obama was our candidate. And he listened to us, finally. So my point is, go out and run for office.
last 2 years, I taught in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and now I work at a grant run program at Kingsborough Community College teaching people that are repeatedly failing algebra. So I've taught math the whole entire time. I actually live in Crown Heights also, but I like to argue that I live there because I have $900 a month student loans, and I like to be around honest people, and you don't find a lot of those in the suburbs. So Brooklyn's where it's at. But my question is, Tessa, correct? You talked about environmental violence and violence in general. I would like to know your guys' thoughts on educational violence. So my students would come to school with all sorts of problems dealing with systemic racism, and schools very full of white savior complexes. So we have very high teacher turnover rates, and we have people coming in. I grew up in trailer parks, which is very different than housing projects. There was no gang violence, there was no systemic racism against communities who lived peacefully. So I understand a tiny bit, but these children are coming into school and dealing with all of this. And how do you think I absolutely love Bernie, and I agree that he's completely not perfect. But I mean, yeah, who is perfect? But I'm curious how we're going to address the educational violence against minorities, as well as the educational violence that's happening as a whole. People don't even know how to register to vote. My college students, they're between the ages of 20 and 60, and they didn't know that you have to be registered as Democrat to vote for Bernie. We have a serious educational problem on many levels. But I would love to know your thoughts on the educational violence that's happening against minorities.
No, I think it's for the panel, right?
Yeah, but
You're so right about that.
what's so exciting, you know, but the
Hello. Right. Thank you for that. It's so exciting to see so many young people be, activated and want to vote, but so many people move away from their parents to go to college, and they don't realize that they can't just vote where they move. So I think, first of all, just educating young people about how to vote is incredibly important. But does someone else want to speak to just in general educational violence?
I was just going to say, for one, doing voter registration for over a dozen years, just starting off many years ago in a shop next to Jeans with Rock to Vote. I can tell you that they really are more than okay with young people not knowing how to register and not knowing how to vote. That's kind of the whole point. So when you're talking about millions and billions of dollars being spent by lobbyists, they're really only interested in the people that are already on the roll call, so they can then somehow manipulate and figure out, okay, these people are going to really show up, are they really aware of this or that, how are they going to vote? And then they spend a lot of money on get out the vote stuff, and they also, obviously, there's a lot of manipulations and other things that are going on, but that's really the whole thing. There is that violence that's happening is because we don't want an educated electorate. We don't want people to really be participating, because then you become a swing vote, and then you don't know how you're going to vote. You're first-time voters. They can't figure that out and do an algorithm to justify how much money they're spending, and they want to win. And so when you think about that, it took $1 billion for Obama to become president. That's an absurd and reprehensible amount of money. Exactly, they don't. So but when these people don't have health care, I was saying this to Tessa earlier, as an actor, we know all about the razzle-dazzle that you have to do to be like, hey, we got a movie coming out, come and check us out, and there's a new movie, a new play, a new book, a new this, and we're trying to kind of penetrate into the business of your lives. If you're especially a person of color, or Native Indian, or poor, whatever race that you are, all of a sudden, you have that much more health issues, you're making that much less money, you have that much more violence in your community, you have that much more disparity between, and issues between your police force, all of the other things. So you're barely registering what's going on in current events around you. And then you have on your media, your corporate media, they're not helping either. That's the one time people do check in and go, okay, what did I miss this week? What can I do? Give me the cliff notes. And then they're spoon spoon-fed this incorrect information, so they continue to vote against themselves. And you see it, like my cousin works at Fox, and she was like, I don't talk about war or politics anymore, because I can tell you, I was in the room when thousands of hours of footage came in from Iraq, and then we whittled it down to 30-second clips that we gave you to argue about, so have fun with that. You know, so like, that's the reality that we're working in. So that's where the online space is really interesting. You know, you have companies, you know, schools like MIT trying to figure out badge systems so that you can come to an event like this and get a badge of certification so that you can qualify and that can be accredited to you for your education, because people are learning in a different way, and that's why young people are so much more wise, I think. You know, it seems like they're all like this on their phones all the time, but they're actually looking up videos, they're looking up articles, they're looking up games, they're also liking pictures, they're doing whatever, but have you seen this? Did you look at that? And they're just ingesting information all day long. And what was so difficult about having to go in the Dewey Decimal System and go to the library and have to look it up right now, like, people, you know, and so like that's what's not encouraged. You know, we're not talking about how beautiful it is that people will work a full-time job and then go home and do an entire Wikipedia page with all the sources cited and everything in there because they just want to give information, they want to share. Instead, we're pushing back against our whistleblowers and saying that the things that they're exposing that are illegal and actually beneficial to us is bad. Like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense, because they're pushing back against transparency. They're pushing back against us having knowledge and having power. They don't want us to organize. They don't want to have that. So that, you know, the idea of Bernie saying education, free college education for everybody, so that kids don't have to worry about making a choice. Like even I did. You know, it's like there's this big supposition. Okay, I got picked up to Athens when I was 15. I got accepted to Trinity. I got accepted to USC. But it was like I can go to school and rack up a big debt, or I can just see how long this acting thing pans out. And luckily for me, it's 21 years later, and I'm still doing it. Every decision, I'll work first, and my education will come later. And so the idea that parents don't have to think about that, and kids don't have to think about that, and they can go, oh yeah, the expectation is I'm going to take this all the way, and I have a chance to, and to poo-poo on it by going, well, I don't want to pay for Trump's kids to go to school, why not? And there's public school access for everyone across the board, you know what ends up happening? Those schools rise up because you have people who expect those public schools to be really great. So they're going to invest and make sure that those public schools that then everybody benefits from is good enough for Trump's kids. So, like, again, this narrative that keeps getting pushed back upon so that we can't get to the core issue of how important it is to have access to education and how important it is to be talking about it and investing in it and saying that it's an expectation of our youth. Like, the fact that that's getting pushed back in a negative narrative at all is the problem. Because the information is there, the opportunity is there. We're just continually being misled that it's not for us for some reason.
I think the question you asked is such an important one. And I just want to say, I think one of the reasons, as you put it, that we see this kind of educational violence is because so many of our kids have been viewed as disposable. Yes. Our kids of color are viewed as not likely to contribute much of any value to our society, and so schools become sort of warehouses before they're transferred to another institution. And we see it playing out at a policy level as our politicians have invested in prisons rather than in our schools, as funds have been transferred away from child welfare and housing and invested in a prison building boom, as state after state have allowed the public education system to deteriorate while massive investments are made in a correctional system that will monitor people while they're in cages and then once they're out. So we've made a choice as a nation about who we care about. And in a real democracy, every life matters. Every vote counts, every kid counts, every child matters. That's not the democracy we have today. And, you know, one of the things Bernie has managed to do in his campaign is to remind us that in other countries, things like universal health care, high-quality public education, free college tuition, subsidized child care are things that citizens take for granted, that aren't radical ideas, are mainstream ideas, the kinds of rights every citizen can take for granted. But here in America, that's not the case. And why isn't it the case? I think it's two primary reasons. One, because our politicians are owned and are not, in fact, accountable to the people they claim to serve, but also because of the history of race and racism in America that has made it so that our nation doesn't see us as a common family, part of a common community. It's us versus them. And what research has shown is that the most punitive nations in the world are the most diverse. The countries that have the most compassionate, most lenient, criminal justice systems and sentencing policies are the most homogeneous. The same goes with welfare systems. The most generous welfare states can be found in the most homogeneous countries, right? But where there's diversity, where there's a history of racism, where there's a history of slavery or colonialism, where there's a lot of immigration, then it's us versus them. And so the question for us, I think, as we come together and think about political revolution and think about what that really means, is about whether we are capable of creating a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy where every life truly matters, every voice truly matters, every vote truly matters, or whether we'll continue to have a political system that is run by and for the privileged few. And so as this political revolution is born and expands and continues to grow, I hope that we will place those kids that you described who aren't given adequate educational opportunities or never even taught how to vote a real voice in this movement, as well as all those who've been locked up, locked out, discarded, and left behind. Let this revolution be one that includes all of us, so that every life eventually really will matter.
We have won a number of the last nominating contests. I'll say 6 of them. We are looking for a win in Wisconsin on Tuesday, and we're looking for a win right here in New York. But we can't win New York without garnering support of people like yourself in this room. So we are actively reaching out to communities across New York State, communities right here in New York to garner your support. So there are campaign staff all around. Wave your hands, ladies and gents that are here, and we want to talk to you. So we'll be sticking around for a little bit to have some conversations. We're very interested. We do have your information because that's how you got in this room. So we will be calling you. But I can tell you straight from the senator that he is very interested in these conversations, but also creating policies and making change. The political revolution is alive and well, ladies, and we need each and every one of you to help make it happen. We also want to put you to work. So if you are already feeling the burn, we have a Women of Color canvas that's going to happen tomorrow, and we are just calling ladies from all over New York City to come on out and knock some doors with us in canvas. And so Ms. Ruby and Melanie are right over here. They are going to be leading our canvas tomorrow, so make sure you come chat with them. Let them know. They'll go over to the sign-in table, and they can mark your name down if you're interested in canvas or you just want more information. We can make that happen. If you've got questions about the campaign, if you have questions about Bernie, if you have questions for anybody on this panel, Ms. Kierna has to go, but I think some of the other folks will be able to stick around for a little bit so we can answer questions that way. But again, we just want to say thank you for coming out today, for spending your lunch hour with us. Another round of applause for this panel. Please tip your bartender, and we'll see you next time. Pause for one photo. One photo, and then you gotta run. Okay, I'll get it. But pause for one picture right now, real quick, if you want to take it. Yeah, we're gonna stand.
Okay, it's now this selection, and then it's on there now.